I used to think motherhood came with a lifetime guarantee. You carry them for 9 months. You raise them for years. You build your entire world around their laughter, their scraped knees, their school lunches, their dreams. And somehow, you assume you'll always have a starring role in their life. I was wrong. My name doesn't matter as much as my title once did. For 27 years, I was simply Mom.
Saad's mom. And that was enough.
Saad was born on a rainy April morning in a small hospital that smelled like antiseptic and hope. The nurse placed him in my arms, and I remember thinking, I will never let this world hurt you. Life did hurt him. Of course it did. But I stood between him and every storm I could. When his father passed away unexpectedly during Saad's last year of college, something inside me broke quietly. I never allowed myself to fall apart. I couldn't. Saad still needed tuition paid. Groceries still needed buying. The house still needed warmth. So I stitched my grief into strength. I cooked, cleaned, budgeted, prayed, and worked from home tailoring clothes late into the night. I skipped buying new shoes so he could attend a networking event in a proper suit. I lied about not being hungry so he could have the last piece of chicken. I was proud of him. So proud. When he landed his first corporate job, he lifted me off the floor in our tiny kitchen and said, "Mom, I'll give you the world." I smiled. I didn't want the world. I just wanted to stay in his. Saad met Sanaa at a friend's engagement party. He told me about her that night, his voice soft in a way I hadn't heard before. "She's different, Mom."
Different.
I met her 2 weeks later at a cafe downtown. She wore confidence like perfume, strong, noticeable, lingering. She was educated, modern, sharp. She shook my hand firmly and called me Auntie before correcting herself to Mom with a polite smile. She wasn't rude. She wasn't cruel. She was simply independent. And independence is beautiful until it slowly pushes you out of the frame. They married 6 months later in a wedding that was larger than anything I had ever imagined. Saad insisted on everything being perfect. I stood in a gold-embroidered outfit, greeting guests, telling everyone how happy I was. And I was. I truly was. Because my son looked at her the way his father used to look at me. Full of promise. After the wedding, Saad moved into Sanaa's apartment closer to his office. It made sense. Less commute. Better neighborhood. Modern building. He asked me to come live with them. "I don't want you alone," he said. But I saw the hesitation in Sanaa's eyes. It wasn't fear.
It wasn't dislike.
It was adjustment. New marriage. New space. New dynamic. So I declined. "I'm fine here," I said. "This is your time." And I meant it. But I didn't know your time would slowly become not mine anymore. At first, Saad called every night. Then it became every other night.
Then weekends.
Then "I'll call you later, Mom." Later became tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. And suddenly I was checking my phone like a teenager waiting for a crush to text back. I told myself I was being dramatic. He was busy. New job promotion. New responsibilities. Marriage requires attention. But the ache didn't listen to logic. I would cook his favorite biryani on Sundays out of habit. Then I'd remember he wasn't coming. So I'd pack it into containers and send it through the driver. Sometimes Sanaa would text, "Thank you, Mom, red heart."
Saad rarely did.
Not because he didn't care, but because he assumed I already knew. The dinner that changed everything. One Friday evening, Saad invited me over for dinner. "It's been too long," he said cheerfully. I wore my best shawl. I brought homemade kheer. I arrived 15 minutes early because mothers always do. The apartment was sleek, minimalist, everything white and gray. It looked like a magazine cover. Sanaa hugged me politely. We sat at the dining table, and I noticed something subtle but sharp. Inside jokes. Shared glances. Stories I hadn't heard before. Plans I wasn't part of. They talked about a weekend getaway. "We're thinking of New York next month," Sanaa said. I blinked. Saad had never mentioned it. "That's nice," I said softly. Then came the moment. Sanaa laughed at something Saad said and added, "You always overreact like that." He grinned. I get it from Mom.
They both laughed.
But it wasn't affectionate. It was casual, distant, like I was a reference point, not a presence. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was watching my own son from outside the glass. Like I had been edited out of the main storyline. I was tired of feeling like an extra in the movie of his life. It wasn't one big incident. It was 100 small ones. Birthdays where I found out about celebrations through photos online. Doctor appointments he didn't tell me about. Decisions made without my opinion. Sanaa redecorated the guest room, the one they once said was Mom's room, into a home office. No one told me. I found out when I came over and saw my old quilt folded in a storage box. It just made more sense, Sanaa explained kindly. You don't stay overnight much. I nodded. Of course I didn't. I didn't want to intrude. But now even the possibility had been removed. One evening, Saad came to visit unexpectedly. He looked tired.
Stressed.
Marriage wasn't as effortless as Instagram made it seem. We sat in the living room, and for a moment, it felt like old times. Mom, he said suddenly, do you feel distant from us? My heart skipped. Honesty stood at my door. I could lie, I could say everything was perfect, or I could risk sounding needy. I began carefully, like I don't know where I fit anymore. He frowned. You're my mother. You'll always fit. Yes, I said gently. But where? He didn't understand. And that's when I realized something painful. Children don't see the fading. They only see the present. Mothers remember the entire past. A week later, Sanaa invited me for coffee. Just us. I was nervous, but she surprised me. I hope you don't feel replaced, she said directly. Replaced. The word stung because it was accurate. I don't want to take him away from you, she continued. I just want to build my own space with him. And there it was.
Space.
Marriage requires it. But motherhood never prepared me for shrinking. I don't want to compete, I told her quietly. I just don't want to disappear. Her eyes softened. You won't, she said. But intentions and reality are two different things. It happened on my birthday. Saad forgot. He didn't call in the morning. Didn't text. Didn't show up. By evening, I told myself he was planning a surprise. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Happy birthday, Mom. So sorry, crazy day at work. Love you. No visit. No call. Just text. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of understanding. Tired of adjusting. Tired of pretending that crumbs felt like a feast. That night, I made a decision. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just firm. If I felt like an extra, I would stop auditioning for the lead role. I joined a community center. Started teaching tailoring classes twice a week. Reconnected with old friends. I repainted my living room a soft blue. I changed the curtains. I stopped waiting by the phone. When Saad called, I answered warmly. But I no longer built my entire day around the possibility. When he canceled visits, I didn't reschedule immediately. I let him come to me. And slowly something shifted. Not in him. In me. The ache lessened. Because I stopped measuring my worth by his attention. Months later, Saad visited again. He looked around. You've changed things, he said. I've changed, I corrected gently. He studied me. You don't call as much. I smiled. I didn't want to disturb you. Guilt flashed across his face. I didn't mean to make you feel unimportant. I know, I said. And I meant it. He hadn't been cruel. Just unaware. Marriage had consumed him the way parenthood once consumed me. Life is circular like that. I will always be his mother. But I am no longer the center of his universe. And that is not betrayal. It is growth. What hurt wasn't losing control. It was losing identity. For years, I was Saad's mom. Now I am learning to just be me. Not an extra. Not a forgotten character. But a woman who raised a good man and is now writing her own chapter. Saad still visits. Sanaa still calls. Sometimes we laugh the way we used to. Sometimes I still feel that small sting. but it no longer defines me. Because I understand something now. Children don't leave you to hurt you. They leave to build themselves. And mothers must learn to rebuild too. Epilogue. Last week, Saad surprised me. He showed up with flowers and said, "I want you to come stay with us for a week. The office can wait." I looked at Sanaa. She smiled sincerely this time. "Please, Mom." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like an extra stepping onto someone else's stage. I felt invited, chosen, still loved. But even if I hadn't been, I would have been okay. Because I am no longer tired of feeling like an extra. I am done feeling like one at all. When Saad asked me to stay with them for a week, I smiled. But inside, my heart trembled. Not from excitement. From caution. Because once you've felt invisible in a place, returning to it feels like walking back into a room where your chair may or may not still exist. Still, I packed my small suitcase. 2 shawls, MY medicines, and a photo of Saad as a child that I always carried between the pages of my Quran. Old habits don't leave easily. Neither do old wounds. Sanaa opened the door before I rang the bell.
Mom.
"You're here," she said warmly, hugging me.
Warm.
Not polite. Not formal.
Warm.
That was new. The apartment smelled different too.
Softer.
Homely. Less like a showroom and more like a place people actually lived in. And then I saw it. The guest room. My old quilt was back on the bed. Folded neatly. My pillow placed exactly the way I liked it, slightly raised. I stopped at the doorway. "You changed the room," I whispered. Sanaa smiled gently. "It was always your room, Mom. I just didn't realize how important that was before." That sentence sat deep in my chest. Not dramatic. Not apologetic. Just aware. And awareness is the first form of respect. Dinner was simple.
Dal. Rice.
Grilled chicken. But something about the table felt different this time. Saad kept including me in conversations. "Mom, what do you think? Mom, remember when you used to make this? Mom, tell Sanaa that story." It was small, but intentional. And intention heals what neglect quietly breaks. Still, I noticed things. Sanaa and Saad had their rhythm. Their inside jokes, their routines, their silent glances across the table. Once upon a time, those glances belonged to me and my husband. Now they belong to them. And for the first time, I didn't feel threatened by it. I just felt replaced in the most natural way life allows. The next morning, I woke up early as usual. Old mothers don't sleep late, even when they are guests. I went to the kitchen and found Sanaa already there, making tea. "You wake up this early every day?" I asked. She nodded, smiling tiredly. "Saad leaves early. I make his breakfast and lunch." I paused. For years, that had been my routine. Packing his lunch, ironing his shirts, making sure he never left home hungry. And now, someone else was doing it. Not to erase me, but to continue loving him in her own way. That realization hurt.
But it also humbled me.
Because love had not been taken from me. It had just been passed forward. People assume that when a son marries, he forgets his mother because he becomes happier. But happiness is not the full story. That afternoon, Saad returned home earlier than usual. His face looked exhausted. He loosened his tie and sat on the couch silently. Sanaa followed him with a glass of water. "You didn't eat lunch again, did you?" she asked. "I had meetings," he replied sharply. "I packed lunch for a reason, Saad." And I said I was busy. The room fell silent. I froze in the hallway, not wanting to intrude, not wanting to disappear either. This was their life, their marriage, their pressure. And suddenly, I understood something I had never considered before. While I was grieving the distance, they were surviving adulthood. Bills, careers, expectations, marriage adjustments. Life had become heavier for them too, just in different ways. That night, Sanaa came to my room. She knocked softly. "Mom, are you awake?" "Yes, son." She sat beside me, her shoulders slightly slumped. "Can I ask you something honestly?" I nodded. Was Saad always this quiet when he was stressed? I smiled faintly. "He talks less when he carries too much." Her eyes widened. That's exactly what he does now. She hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing as a wife." That sentence shocked me. The confident, modern, independent Sana feeling inadequate? Why would you think that? I asked gently. Because he doesn't share everything with me. He bottles things up. And then I overthink. And then we argue. I exhaled slowly. He did the same after his father passed away, I said. He protects others by hiding his own pain. Tears formed in her eyes. I didn't know that. Of course she didn't. She married the man. I raised the boy. And those two versions are never identical. 3 days into my stay, something unexpected happened. Saad came home with a cake. "Early celebration," he said cheerfully. "For what?" I asked. "For Mom Appreciation Week," he joked. Sana laughed. But my eyes filled. Not because of the cake. Because of the effort. During dinner, Saad suddenly grew serious. "I owe you an apology, Mom." The room went still. "For what?" I asked softly. "For making you feel like you were less important after my marriage." The words hit exactly where my silence had lived. "I never stopped loving you," he continued. "I just assumed you'd always understand. Always adjust. Always be there." And that was the truth. Mothers are expected to adjust endlessly. Without complaint. Without exhaustion. Without acknowledgement. I was tired of feeling like an extra. I finally said. Sana looked down. Saad's face fell. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "I know," I replied gently. "But unintentional distance still hurts." We talked for hours that night. Not as mother and son. Not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. But as 3 adults learning how to share one emotional space. "I thought giving you space was respecting your marriage," I told them. "And I thought not bothering you meant I was being a good son," Saad admitted. "And I thought including you too much might make you uncomfortable," Sana added. We all stared at each other, then laughed softly. 3 people. 3 assumptions. 1 distance. That week, something inside me shifted deeply. I realized something painful but freeing. Children don't notice the slow emotional fading of mothers. Because mothers hide it well. We smile during video calls, we say, "I'm fine," too easily do we avoid expressing loneliness, so they won't feel guilty. And in doing so, we teach them that we need less, even when we need more. It happened on the 5th night. Unexpectedly. Saad was sitting on the balcony when I joined him. He stared at the city lights silently. "Mom," he said after a long pause, "do you ever feel scared of becoming unnecessary?" The question pierced me. Every single day. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked, "Why are you asking?" He leaned back, exhaling heavily. At work, new people are younger, smarter, faster. At home, I'm trying to be a good husband. And somewhere in all this, I feel like I'm failing everyone. My heart softened instantly. This was my son. Still the same boy. Just carrying adult fears now. "You are not failing," I said quietly. "You are growing." His voice cracked. "I miss the days when life was simple. When I just came home and you handled everything." And there it was. The confession no successful man admits easily. He didn't forget me. He missed the emotional safety I represented. By the 6th day, Sana started involving me in daily routines. "Mom, teach me your biryani recipe." "Mom, how did you manage everything alone after Uncle passed away?" "Mom, what calms Saad when he overthinks?" She wasn't replacing me. She was learning from me. And suddenly, I no longer felt like an extra. I felt like a foundation. Not visible in every scene, but holding the entire structure steady. On the last evening of my stay, Sana said something that changed everything. "Mom, why don't you move in with us permanently?" Silence filled the room. Olmi would have said yes instantly. Lonely me would have packed the same night. But healed me paused. "I love visiting," I said gently. "But I also love my independence." Saad looked surprised. "You don't feel alone?" I smiled. "I felt more alone when I depended emotionally on your attention." Now, I live my own life too. That was growth, not distance. When I returned to my house, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful, because I was no longer waiting to be remembered. I was living, teaching classes, meeting friends, calling them sometimes, not always waiting for their calls. And strangely, that balance brought Saad closer. He started visiting more often, not out of guilt, but out of genuine desire. The new dynamic. Months passed, and our relationship evolved into something healthier. He didn't call daily, but when he called, he talked fully. He didn't visit weekly, but when he visited, he stayed longer. Sanaa sent me recipes, photos, and random voice notes. Not formal updates, real connection. And I realized something profound. Respect grows where emotional pressure reduces. I used to think being a mother meant being central forever. Now I understand. Motherhood is not about staying at the center. It is about becoming the roots. Invisible, uncelebrated, but essential. I am no longer tired of feeling like an extra, because I am no longer measuring my role by visibility. I am still his mother, still his comfort, still his home. Just not the only home he is now. And that is not loss. That is life. On my next birthday, the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find Saad and Sanaa standing there with breakfast, flowers, and a framed photo of the three of us. Saad hugged me tightly. "I will never forget again," he whispered. Sanaa smiled warmly. "You were never an extra, Mom. You were always the original chapter." Tears filled my eyes. Not of pain, not of loneliness, but of quiet understanding. Because the truth is, a mother's role doesn't end after her son's marriage. It transforms. And once I stopped fighting that transformation, I stopped feeling invisible. I stopped feeling replaced. And most importantly, I stopped feeling like an extra in my own story. A strange thing happens when you stop waiting to be needed. Silence stops hurting. The phone not ringing stops feeling personal. And the house, once echoing with absence, begins to sound like peace instead of loneliness. A year ago, I measured my days by Saad's calls. Now I measure them by my own routines. Morning tea by the window, tailoring classes twice a week, evening walks where the sky slowly melts into gold and pink. I did not lose my son. I found myself. And that discovery came with a different kind of strength, the quiet kind that does not demand attention. It was our first Eid after my emotional shift. For years, Eid meant one thing: cooking endlessly and waiting for Saad to walk through the door first. He always used to, even after getting his job, even when life got busy, until marriage happened. Last Eid had been the hardest. I waited. He came late, stayed briefly, left early. I smiled through it, then cried quietly after he left. This year, I decided something different. I woke up early, cooked my favorite dishes, not just his. I wore a soft pastel outfit instead of the heavy ones I used to wear to impress guests. And most importantly, I stopped looking at the door every few minutes. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. "Eid Mubarak, Mom. We're on the way." Not a text. Not a late message. On the way. My heart fluttered, but I didn't rush around in panic like before. I simply smiled and said, "Drive safely." When they arrived, Saad hugged me longer than usual. "You look happy," he said, observing carefully. "I am," I replied. And for the first time, that happiness wasn't dependent on his presence. Sanaa had changed too. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gently. She entered the house carrying gifts, not expensive ones, but thoughtful ones. A new shawl, a recipe book, and a framed photo from the day I stayed at their apartment. "I wanted you to have this," she said softly. I noticed something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Comfort. Earlier, she was cautious around me. Now, she was relaxed. And I realized something important. When I stopped silently competing for my son's emotional space, she stopped feeling defensive. We were no longer two women standing on opposite sides of love. We were simply two women who loved the same person in different ways. After lunch, Saad stayed back while Sanaa went to take a call. He sat beside me on the sofa like he used to as a teenager. Mom, he said quietly, you don't ask me why I don't visit more often anymore. I smiled gently. Because I trust that you come when your heart wants to, not when guilt pushes you. He looked down, visibly affected. I used to think you were upset with me. I was hurt. I corrected softly. Not angry. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize how much my silence affected you. That is the thing about mothers, I said. We rarely complain. So our pain becomes invisible. He held my hand then, something he hadn't done in years. I'm sorry for the time when you felt like an extra in my life. Tears filled my eyes, but they were calm tears. Healing tears. I felt like an extra because I forgot I had my own story, I replied. For decades, my identity was built around one role, Saad's mother. Every decision, every routine, every emotional investment. When he got married, that identity didn't disappear. It simply lost its daily function. And that loss felt like rejection. But now I see the truth clearly. Motherhood is not meant to be a permanent spotlight. It is meant to be a foundation.
Strong. Silent.
Enduring. No one applauds foundations. But everything stands because of them. One afternoon, weeks after Eid, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Sanaa standing alone. Mom, can I come in? She asked with a shy smile. Of course, son. She sat with me in the living room, looking slightly nervous. Saad doesn't know I came, she admitted. I raised my eyebrows playfully. Should I be worried? She laughed softly.
No.
I just wanted to talk to you woman to woman. That sentence surprised me. Not mother-in-law. Not elder. Woman to woman. I used to think you didn't like me, she confessed. My heart paused. Why would you think that? Because you became very distant after our marriage. You stopped calling, stopped giving opinions, stopped interfering. I exhaled slowly. I was trying not to become a burden. Her eyes widened instantly. You were never a burden. I felt like one, I said honestly. And when someone feels like an extra, they either cling or they step back. I chose to step back. Sanaa's eyes filled with emotion. I wish I understood that earlier, she whispered. That day, she opened her heart in a way she never had before. Marriage is harder than it looks, she admitted. Saad is loving, but he carries stress silently. And sometimes I don't know how to reach him emotionally. I listened quietly. He misses you, she added suddenly. My chest tightened. He just doesn't know how to balance both worlds without hurting someone. That sentence stayed with me long after she left, because it revealed something I had overlooked. He wasn't choosing her over me. He was struggling to manage both relationships without failing either. And in his confusion, he chose silence, which unintentionally created distance. That evening, I opened an old album. Photos of Saad as a baby, a toddler to schoolboy with messy hair and a wide smile. I touched one photo where he was clinging to my dupatta, refusing to go to school. You'll come back to pick me? He had asked. Always, I had promised. And I did. Every single day. But life has its own design. Children grow. They stop holding dupattas. They start holding responsibilities. And mothers must learn to loosen their emotional grip without letting love fade. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. I fell mildly ill. Nothing serious, just weakness and fever. Earlier, I would have hidden it, not wanting to disturb Saad. But this time I told him casually. Within hours, he arrived. Not alone.
With Sanaa.
And groceries. And medicine. Why didn't you tell us earlier?
Saad asked, worried.
I didn't want to trouble you, I replied. Sanaa shook her head firmly. Mom, caring for you is not trouble. It is responsibility. And love. That moment broke a quiet wall inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to be cared for without guilt. They insisted on staying the night. Saad cooked, badly but sincerely. Sanaa cleaned the kitchen. And I sat watching them, my heart unusually full. Not because they were taking care of me, but because I no longer felt like an outsider in their life. I felt included. Naturally. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt, but out of connection. The emotional realization. Lying in bed that night, I understood something deeply transformative. I had mistaken transition for rejection. I had mistaken space for abandonment. I had mistaken silence for indifference. But life after marriage is not about replacing parents. It is about expanding emotional responsibilities. And expansion often looks like distance until communication restores balance. The next morning, Saad sat beside me with tea. I was scared you'd feel replaced after my marriage, he admitted. And instead of talking about it, I avoided the topic. I smiled knowingly. Silence protects in the short term but damages in the long term. He nodded slowly. I thought giving you independence would make you strong. And it did, I said softly. But strength and loneliness sometimes look similar from the outside. He held my hand gently. You are never an extra in my life, Mom. I looked at him calmly. I know that now. But for a while, I felt like a background character in your new world. His eyes filled with regret. I wish I noticed earlier. I wish I spoke earlier, I replied. And that was the truth. Distance is rarely one-sided. It grows in the silence between two loving people who are afraid of hurting each other. Today, my days are fuller than they have been in years. I teach young girls tailoring and life skills, that I attend community gatherings, that I even started journaling, something I never had time for when my life revolved entirely around motherhood. Saad calls regularly now. Not excessively. Not out of guilt. But intentionally. Sana visits often, sometimes with recipes, sometimes just to talk. And the best part? I no longer wait. I welcome. There is a difference. I once believed that after my son's marriage, my importance would slowly fade. But importance does not disappear. It evolves. I am no longer the woman who packs his lunch every morning. But I am still the woman whose advice calms him when life overwhelms him. I am no longer the center of his daily routine. But I am still the center of his emotional roots. And that is more powerful than constant presence. Because now, when he comes to me, it is not out of habit, it is out of love. I was tired of feeling like an extra in my son's life. But the truth is, I was never an extra. I was a chapter that quietly shaped the entire story. And chapters do not disappear when the plot moves forward. They remain, woven into every decision, every value, every piece of the person your child becomes. Now, when I sit by my window with my tea, watching the sun rise slowly, I don't feel forgotten. I don't feel replaced. I don't feel invisible. I feel complete, not just as a mother, but as a woman who loved deeply, let go gracefully, and found herself again after believing she had been left behind.